Welcome, everyone. I'm Bonita from Pennies to Dollars, and today I thought we would just cozy up here by the fire and have a little chat about using our pantry stock. This year, I am trying to save money by using up things that I've already purchased that have been sitting around for a while. And I thought I would share some of the tips that my mother used to use, and I find those really interesting. You may not have thought of these. So today we are cozied up here with a big warm animal because it is freezing outside. It is still very low temps here in Kansas. We still have snow on the ground, and I have not been shopping for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer, because I don't want to risk falling in the snow. The roads have still been hazardous up until yesterday, so I am just sitting tight and using what I have. And one of the things I noticed this past year is that I wasn't really using or focusing on my canned goods. I was focusing more on things that were in the freezer and in the refrigerator. And that's all important because we don't want that stuff to go bad. But I was in my mind thinking the stuff in the cans is going to last a really long time, and they will. But I wasn't using them at all. I don't know what I was saving them for. I guess I was thinking, well, I'll save them just in case. But a snowstorm and freezing temperatures and not wanting to get out and slip in the parking lot at the grocery store, I think that is a great time to pull out some of those things. One of the things that I pulled out the last couple of meals was some cans of peaches. Now, I like to keep some canned fruit around my house, and I've had these for a while. In fact, they expired in 2025, and I had picked them up at the Dollar Tree when they were still $1.25, and I could get these giant cans. And they are something I was just sitting on, not using, and I thought this is a great time to pop these open. They have just expired. We should use these up. I don't have anything I'm particularly saving them for, so why not use them now during a snowstorm? And they were really delicious. It was like having a dessert for us. And then I save the can and I put in like my scrub brush by the sink, and I use the can again for a while. So that's one of the things that I pulled out of my pantry. Another thing that I pulled out of my pantry was some canned blue plums, and they also were recently expired. Now, this is an old fashioned canned fruit that you cannot find very well anymore. And this is something that I grew up eating off and on, and I made a blue plum crisp out of it. And this recipe is in one of my Depression Era cookbooks that I list in the description box below. But I grew up eating blue plums out of a can off and on. They were a real treat, and I absolutely loved them. And making a blue plum crisp, oh my gosh, so delicious. So those are some things that I had in my fruit section that I had just been storing, not using for anything else, but storing. And when we go and we catch good deals like this and we stick them back just in case, we want to remember to actually take advantage and use them at some point. We don't want to forget about them in our pantry. And that's exactly what I've been doing these last few years is I've just been forgetting about the canned goods, thinking those are there just in case. I'll use the frozen, I'll use the fresh, and I'll just skip the canned. And so I'm really focusing on that this year. My mom used to always buy only crunchy peanut butter. That's what I grew up with. And I recently asked on my community page whether you buy crunchy or you buy creamy. And a few people said they buy crunchy to do baking with. And I thought that is such a really good idea. I never thought about buying the crunchy for baking and the creamy for eating. I never had creamy until I was an adult. And once I tried the creamy, I never went back to the crunchy because I grew up with crunchy and I really liked the creamy once I tried it. I didn't even know they made another kind when I was growing up. My mom would buy it in these 5 2-pound jars, heavy jars. They were smaller at the bottom, larger at the top. Maybe you remember them. I think they came from either IGA or Safeway back then. Those were the only two grocery stores that we had the choice of that were within driving distance. And my mom would save those jars, of course. But she always said that buying the crunchy, you got more for your money because there were actual nuts in it. Now, I don't know if there's any reasoning to that, but that's what she always said, and that's why we always had the crunchy. Another thing that she did when we went in the grocery stores, if she picked up a can of vegetables and thought of buying them, she would shake them and she would listen and she would see how full it sounded and whether or not you could hear the vegetables in there shaking like they were full or like it was mostly water. Now, that is something I've never seen anyone else do. And she actually had someone come up behind us one day and say, "Ma'am, what are you doing?" And she said, "I am shaking the cans to see how full they are, if they're full of vegetables or if they're mostly full of water because it's by weight." And she said, "One time I bought a can of green beans and there wasn't one bean in there. It was only liquid." Now, I would hope quality assurance has improved since those days, but when we walked away, that gentleman was over there shaking his cans. So that does still work today. You can actually shake a can, and maybe there's 15 ounces in there, but you can tell if it's mostly liquid or mostly vegetables. You can tell. Try it and see. Another thing that I've been really focusing on is using up every drop of everything. Now, when my family was here over the holidays, we made some homemade sloppy joes, and I don't go through a lot of ketchup anymore. Now that my youngest moved away, ketchup is not something that my husband and I eat a lot of, and this was a recipe that would use up some of my ketchup in the fridge. So I used that ketchup, but when it gets down to not wanting to come out of the bottle, I add a little bit of water in there and shake it up to get every last drop. Now, this is something that I've always done. I didn't think anything about it. We've always turned it upside down so that everything can run to the bottom so that you can use the last bit of it. But when I stayed with my 17-year-old grandson this past summer while his parents were traveling abroad, I watched him squirt the ketchup until it sputtered and then toss it in the trash. And I thought, oh my gosh, because there's usually at least 10% or more left in those containers. And it was a big bottle. So yeah, I'm that grandma. I went over there, I took it off at the top of the trash and I turned it upside down. I stuck it back in the fridge. The next day he came in and used it and didn't even notice that it was the same bottle that I just turned upside down. And we had several more hamburger meals of him being able to use that ketchup bottle. So it's funny how we know this as older, experienced, seasoned grown-ups, but I saw this in my 17-year-old. He didn't have a clue that he was throwing away a bunch of ketchup. He just waited till it sputtered and threw it away. I also do that with my laundry soap. I buy my laundry soap in gallon containers, and I've been buying the Hispanic brand. And when it gets to the bottom, I fill that back up with water and I pour it into my washing machine until the bubbles quit making in the bottle. So once I see that I can fill it up and there's no bubbles, then I stop using it and I will discard the bottle or reuse it for something else. But I do that also with my hand dishwashing liquid. I will continue to fill that bottle until there's no more bubbles and no more suds in there before I discard it. I'm going to get every last drop that I paid for. I am not going to waste any of that. Items are too expensive to toss away the last 10% of that bottle. I also like to bulk cook on the days that I'm home that it's cold. Those are great days to make stews, to bake goods, to make your chicken broth on the stove. to make beans and let them simmer and put off some heat into the house. And when I'm done baking, either in the toaster oven or the oven, I pop that door open and I let that residual heat come back into the house. I've already paid for that heat, and I am not going to let it just dissipate inside of a closed container like an oven or a toaster oven. I don't have any children at home. My animals don't mess with it. So it's just a great way to get a little bit of extra heat that I've already paid for by cooking on those cold days and then popping those heated items open until the heat dissipates. We close off rooms here because we only have a propane stove. And I will use the back room that is frigid back there, like a cellar in the wintertime. I will store extra potatoes, apples, onions, carrots, anything like that that you would normally store in a cellar. I will put back there if I can catch them on a good deal. You can bet if I catch potatoes on a great deal, I'm buying extra, even though there's only 2 of us and they are going in that back room, and I'm using it as a cellar in the wintertime. Let me know if you have a cellar. I don't know why we don't have one. This house was built back in the early 1900s. The homes around me have cellars, but for some reason, this one doesn't. And I'm really jealous. I wish that I had a cellar, but I just have a makeshift cellar. I don't have to go down any stairs or fight any cobwebs to get my stuff back out. Another hack that I've used is one where I prolong the life of my batteries, like in my remote control. Around September, we started having trouble with the batteries in our remote, and I just changed them at the end of January. So I extended the life of those batteries for about 4 additional months. And the way I did that is when it wouldn't work, I would just like bang it on my knee and then it would work. Sometimes it wouldn't work when I banged it on my knee. So I would take the back panel off and spin the batteries and then it would work. And my husband came one day and he's like, I think we need new batteries. I said, bang it on your knee. And he did, and it worked. And another day, it wouldn't work when he banged it on his knee. And I said, take the back panel off and spin the batteries. And he took it off and he spun the batteries. And he said, I don't even understand why this works. And I said, I don't know where I learned it, but I've done it my whole life. And it saved us from changing batteries for a really long time. Let me know if you've heard of that little hack. Maybe you saw on my community page that I recently made a pot pie out of leftover chicken stew. Now, this chicken stew also had rice in it and it thickened up, and we ate it for a few meals and I just added water. But then when it thickened up again, I decided when I was here on some days by myself, I was going to change it up. And I like to change up leftovers to make them stretch, to make them seem like they are fresh and new and something different so you're not eating the same thing every day. And I had some pie shells that have been in my freezer for a couple of years, and they're kind that you just roll out and use. And I took some of those out. I rolled them out, I cut them in half, and I made pot pies out of that stew. And I don't know why I never thought of this before. It's a really great way to use up those leftovers. One of our viewers said that they use biscuits to do the same thing, and that would absolutely be delicious and work well as well. But you could do this with beef stew. You could do it with chicken stew. You could do it with several things and make your own little pot pies. Another viewer said that she did this here a while back and made them in large muffin tins and then froze them. So when you get tired of what is in the fridge, before you toss it or before you just stick it in a container and throw it in the freezer and then forget about it, think about what else you can do with those leftovers, because I have found that if I use them up now, I'm more likely to use them up than if I throw them in the freezer. Now, I do try to use up little bits in the freezer, and I've been focusing on that as well this year, pulling out little bits of like diced tomatoes or crushed tomatoes or little bits of broth and throwing them in things so I can get some of those little bits out of the freezer. But those little bits are some of the things that I will forget about early on, and then I don't end up using them, and then they just take up valuable freezer space. I don't want it to go bad, but I also don't want to spend half an afternoon going through all of these little containers and thawing them out and then using them. And that's what I've been doing because I had a bunch of those in there and I don't want them to waste. But using up my leftovers quicker, it just gets those off of the radar. What you follow up on gets done. And I learned this when I was in healthcare administration. If you tell somebody to do something, they may do it, they may not do it. But if they know you're going to follow up on them, they're going to do it. And it's the same way with our leftovers. If we follow up and if we make sure that we freeze and don't toss, or we keep track of what is in the refrigerator or in the freezer, those things are going to get used up. But if we don't follow up and we just toss them in the freezer or the refrigerator, we're going to forget about them. They're going to go bad more often than not. So that is just some of the things that I've been doing during this month of January to use up things that I have and to take advantage of the money I have already spent. Let me know some of the things that you have done this month to save money. I know everybody is dealing with this cold weather. No one wants to get out and shop in this. And they always say we save for a rainy day. Well, I save for a snowy day. I don't want to get out in this. I'm going to use what I have, and I'm absolutely fine doing that because some of the things I have pulled out and used this January have been absolutely delicious. If you've enjoyed this video, please follow me for more content. Thank you for watching today. Give me a thumbs up, hype the video, make a comment. All of those things are so much appreciated. Have a great day.